She drained the glass of water he'd handed her, thinking it was a kind gesture after such a tense dinner. Tense because his mother had relentlessly interrogated her about her salary, while his father had bluntly declared she wasn't the best choice for his son's future. She had shrunk under their razor-sharp words, and he'd only offered a half-hearted squeeze of her hand in comfort. But now, as a heavy fog clouded her mind and her limbs refused to move, she finally understood. It wasn't just water, and his silence during dinner hadn't been weakness. She lay there, paralyzed but terrifyingly awake, listening as his voice joined his mother's in the next room, casually discussing how to handle her. That horrifying dinner hadn't been a test. It had been the first step in taking her down. The ultimate betrayal is just unfolding. We want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments where in the world and what time of day you're watching this from. If you're already hooked, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single moment of this ruthless scheme. Finally, based on this chilling intro, rate the story's potential on a scale of 1 to 10. You're slipping, Clara. Again. Daniel's voice sliced through the dining room, his polished smile a blade aimed at Clara's chest. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she gripped the edge of the white linen tablecloth. The Portland dining room, all sleek glass and sharp angles, felt like a courtroom, and Daniel Harper, her 48-year-old corporate lawyer husband, was judge and jury. Across the table, their neighbor Evelyn nodded, her lips curling with false pity, her eyes glinting like a hawk's. Clara, 45, an environmental scientist whose water purification patent could save millions, sat rigid, her fork trembling in her hand. Daniel leaned forward, his tailored suit creasing, his tone dripping venom. "You forgot the investor meeting. Embarrassed me in front of Klein's team. You're not yourself anymore." Clara's pulse hammered, her throat dry as she opened her mouth to protest. "I didn't forget. Stop." Daniel's hand shot up, cutting her off, his eyes narrowing. "Don't make excuses. You're unraveling, Clara. Everyone sees it." Evelyn's nod deepened, her fingers tapping her wine glass, a silent agreement. Clara's chest burned, her breath shallow, but she forced her face to stay calm, her hazel eyes locked on Daniel's. She wasn't unraveling. She'd been up all night refining her patent, her life's work, a technology to purify water for communities drowning in corporate pollution. But Daniel's words, laced with accusation, twisted her reality, making her doubt her own mind. He stood crossing to the kitchen counter, his movements deliberate, predatory. "You need help, love," he said, his voice softening but sharp beneath, like a knife wrapped in silk. He poured tea from a silver kettle, his back to her, and Clara caught a flicker of his hand. Something small, a pill, dissolving into the amber liquid. Her stomach twisted, a primal alarm ringing in her skull. "Drink this," he said, sliding the cup toward her, his smile too perfect, too practiced. "It's for your nerves." Evelyn's gaze pinned Clara, her smirk barely hidden. "He's right, dear. You look exhausted," she said, her voice syrupy, her eyes cold. Clara's fingers curled around the cup, the warmth biting her skin. She wanted to scream, to fling the tea in his face, but her body froze, years of his control chaining her instincts. She lifted the cup, her lips brushing the rim, the faint chemical tang hitting her tongue. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of betrayal. She sipped, her eyes never leaving Daniel's, searching for the man who'd once cheered her late-night lab breakthroughs. That man was gone, replaced by this stranger whose every word was a calculated strike. As the sedative seeped into her veins, her vision blurred, but her mind clung to a single image. A tarnished key slipping from Daniel's pocket as he cleared the table, clinking softly on the hardwood floor, unnoticed by him, but searing into her memory. The room tilted, her legs weakening, but Clara's resolve hardened. She wouldn't collapse, not in front of them. Her teeth ground harder, pain shooting through her jaw as she fought the drug's pull. Daniel's voice droned on, lecturing about her fragility, but it was Evelyn's smug glance that cut deepest, a conspirator's look. Clara's fingers tightened on the cup, her knuckles white, as she realized this wasn't just Daniel's game. Something bigger was at play, and that key, small, rusted, out of place, was her first clue. As her head swam, she vowed to hold on, to unravel whatever Daniel was hiding. The tea's bitterness lingered on her tongue, a promise of the fight to come. Clara's knees buckled, the sedative's grip tightening like a vice around her limbs, but she refused to crumble. "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," she bit out, her voice a low growl, each word a shard of defiance slicing through the haze. Her hazel eyes blazed, locking onto his, daring him to see the fire he hadn't snuffed out. Daniel's smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his chiseled face, but he waved her off, his hand dismissive, as if her words were dust. Evelyn's lips twitched, her fingers drumming on the wineglass, her gaze sharp enough to draw blood. Clara's chest heaved, her breath ragged, but she forced her body to move, one deliberate step at a time, toward the bathroom door. The tarnished key's image burned in her mind, a lifeline anchoring her to the truth she was beginning to grasp. She stumbled into the bathroom, the cold tiles biting her bare feet, and locked the door with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Her hands gripped the sink, knuckles whitening, as she stared into the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, pale, eyes sunken, but her jaw was set, teeth grinding so hard her temples throbbed. The tea's chemical aftertaste coated her tongue, a bitter reminder of Daniel's betrayal. Her fingers fumbled to her pocket, brushing the tarnished key she'd scooped up when Daniel turned away. Its rough edges pressed into her palm, grounding her as the room spun. She wouldn't let him win. Not like this. Not after years of his subtle cuts, his concern that caged her, his voice that made her doubt her own brilliance. Clara's heart pounded, each beat a war drum against the sedative's pull. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock jolting her senses, forcing her mind to claw through the fog. Her thoughts raced to her lab notebook, left on the dining table, its pages filled with her water purification patent, her life's work, her fight for clean water in communities choked by corporate greed. Daniel's words echoed, "You're unraveling." No, she wasn't. She was a scientist, a creator, and she'd be damned if she let him paint her as broken. Her fingers tightened around the key, its weight a promise. She didn't know what it unlocked, but it was a piece of his puzzle, and she'd use it to tear his lies apart. Outside, Daniel's voice carried through the door, smooth and patronizing, talking to Evelyn about Clara's condition. "She's not coping," he said, his tone dripping with false pity. Evelyn's murmur of agreement was a knife in Clara's gut, confirming her suspicion. Evelyn wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was in on it, whatever it was. Clara's nails dug into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She leaned against the door, her breath shallow, fighting the drug's weight. Her mind flashed to the moment she'd sipped the tea, Daniel's eyes glinting with something cold, something calculated. She'd trusted him once, believed in the man who'd toasted her breakthroughs with cheap wine in their grad school days. That trust was ashes now, but her resolve was steel. She straightened, her legs trembling but holding firm, and wiped her face with a towel. Her reflection hardened, the scientist reawakening. She wouldn't confront him now, not yet. She needed to play his game, let him think she was weak while she pieced together the truth. The key in her pocket was her first weapon, a small, rusted clue to whatever Daniel was hiding. As the sedative dragged at her, she whispered to herself, "You don't get to erase me." Her voice was a vow, low and fierce, carrying the weight of years suppressed. She unlocked the door, her hands steady, and stepped back into the hall, her face a mask of fragility, but her heart a furnace of defiance. The dining room light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet to be uncovered, pulling her toward the fight ahead. Daniel's fingers froze on Clara's lab notebook, its worn leather cover open on the dining room table. The pages a testament to her brilliance, her water purification patent, equations scrawled in her precise hand. His smirk faded, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his mouth as he flipped to a new page, one he hadn't seen before. A sketch of a lock, jagged and crude, stared back at him, drawn in Clara's ink but with an urgency that didn't match her usual precision. His pulse quickened, a bead of sweat prickling his brow. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice low, sharp, like a blade catching on bone. He slammed the notebook shut, his eyes darting to the bathroom door where Clara had retreated, her defiant words, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," still ringing in his ears. Had she seen the key? Did she know? He paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood, the sound a metronome to his rising unease. The tarnished key, now back in his pocket, burned against his thigh, a secret he hadn't meant to drop. It unlocked a safe in his office, holding documents that could ruin him. Contracts tying him to Margaret Klein's corporation, proof of their plan to bury Clara's patent. He'd been careless, letting it slip during dinner, and now this sketch, this jagged lock, felt like a warning. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding as he replayed Clara's steady gaze, her refusal to collapse under the sedative's weight. She wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to fade, to let him control the narrative, to let him sell her work to Klein's empire for millions while declaring her incompetent. Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone syrupy but edged. "She's getting worse, Daniel. You saw her stumble." She leaned against the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, her eyes glinting with complicity. "The doctor's appointment tomorrow will seal it." Daniel nodded, but his stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with the nagging fear he'd underestimated Clara. He forced a smile, his voice smooth. "She's no threat. The pill's doing its job." But as he spoke, his hand slipped into his pocket, clutching the key, its rough edges biting his skin. The sketch haunted him. Had Clara drawn it before the tea or after? Was she playing him? In the bathroom, Clara leaned against the sink, her breath ragged, her fingers gripping the tarnished key like a lifeline. The sedative dragged at her limbs, but her mind was a furnace, burning through the fog. She'd overheard Daniel's phone call as she'd stumbled to the door, his voice cold, clinical. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer striking steel, forging her rage. The key, small and rusted, was no accident. It was a crack in Daniel's armor, a clue to his betrayal. She didn't know what it opened, but it was tied to the lie he'd fed her, the lie that her work, her life, was slipping away because of her own weakness. Her teeth ground so hard her jaw ached, the pain anchoring her against the drug's pull. She splashed more water on her face, the cold biting her skin, and stared into the mirror. Her reflection was pale, but her eyes were alive, blazing with a fury she hadn't felt in years. Daniel thought he'd broken her, thought his concern had caged her spirit. But that key, that sketch she'd scribbled in her notebook before dinner, was her rebellion. She'd drawn the lock instinctively, a fragment of her scientist's mind, piecing together the puzzle of his control. Now, hearing his words, she knew. He wasn't just undermining her, he was erasing her. Daniel's footsteps echoed outside, closer now, and Clara's pulse spiked. She tucked the key deeper into her pocket, her fingers trembling but resolute. She wouldn't confront him, not yet. She needed to stay sharp, to play the fragile wife he expected, while she hunted for the truth. His voice came through the door, softer now, laced with fake worry. "Clara, you okay in there?" Her lips curled, a silent snarl, as she forced her voice to quiver. "Just dizzy," she said, letting her words wobble, a performance to keep him off guard. She unlocked the door, her hands steady despite the drug's weight, and stepped out, her face a mask of exhaustion, but her mind a coiled spring. The dining room light flickered, casting Daniel's shadow long and jagged, like the lock in her sketch, a promise of secrets she'd tear open. "You think you can outsmart me, Clara?" Daniel's voice hissed through the phone, his words a venomous jab as he stood in his sleek Portland office. The city's pulse muted beyond the glass walls. His fingers gripped the receiver, knuckles whitening, as he spoke to Evelyn, his ally in betrayal. The tarnished key sat heavy in his pocket, a nagging reminder of the sketch he'd found in Clara's lab notebook. A jagged lock, drawn with an urgency that gnawed at his certainty. Her words from last night, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," echoed in his skull. Not the frail whimper he'd expected, but a steel-edged vow that made his pulse spike. He drugged her tea, watched her stumble, But that sketch, that defiance, suggested she wasn't as broken as he needed her to be. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding until his temples throbbed, as he realized he might have miscalculated. He slammed the phone down, his tailored suit creasing as he paced, each step a hammer strike against the polished floor. Clara's notebook, now locked in his desk, haunted him. That lock sketch wasn't just a doodle, it was a crack in his plan to sell her water purification patent to Margaret Klein's corporation, a deal that would bury her technology and line his pockets with millions. He needed her docile, declared incompetent, but her steady gaze last night, her refusal to collapse, planted a seed of doubt. Was she on to him? He needed to find her, to gauge her, to smother any spark of rebellion before it ignited. His fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges biting his skin, a secret tying him to the safe where the contract with Klein waited, unsigned but damning. Daniel grabbed his coat, his movements sharp, predatory, and drove to the community center where Clara volunteered, a place she'd mentioned in passing, her voice soft but alive with purpose. The thought of her there, surrounded by people, teaching kids about clean water, twisted his gut. Not with guilt, but with fear she was slipping from his control. He parked, his eyes scanning the lot, and strode inside, his charm a polished mask as he approached the receptionist. "I'm here for Clara Bennett," he said, his smile tight, his tone clipped. "Her husband. She's not well." The receptionist hesitated, her eyes narrowing but pointed him toward a classroom. Daniel's heart pounded, his hand clutching the key like a talisman as he prepared to confront her. Inside, he saw Clara through the glass door, her hands gesturing animatedly as she explained a water filter model to a group of kids. Her face, usually pale under his shadow, was alight, her hazel eyes sharp, her voice steady. His stomach lurched. This wasn't the fragile wife he'd crafted. He pushed the door open, cutting off her sentence mid-word. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice a blade, slicing through the room's warmth. The kids froze, their eyes wide, but Clara's gaze met his, unflinching, her jaw tightening. "Not now, Daniel," she said, her words crisp, a warning. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and hissed, "You're embarrassing yourself. You need rest." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers curling into fists, but she didn't back down. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm, and pulled her toward the hall, ignoring the kids' murmurs. "You're not well," he said, his voice low, cutting off her protest. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." Her eyes flashed, a storm brewing, but she nodded, her shoulders slumping in a calculated act of submission. His chest loosened, thinking he'd won, but her gaze lingered on his pocket, where the key hid. As he let her out, her notebook flashed in his mind, the lock sketch a taunt. He needed to find Elena Torres, Clara's old lab partner, the one she'd been emailing. If Clara was talking, Elena might know too much. Daniel's fingers tightened on Clara's arm, his resolve hardening, but her silence was heavy, a coiled spring ready to snap. As they stepped into the parking lot, Clara's hand brushed her pocket, where the tarnished key rested, her secret weapon, a promise of the truth she'd claw from his lies. "Keep dreaming, Maya. Your ideas can change the world," Clara said, her voice steady, a spark of fire cutting through the fog of last night's sedative. Her hazel eyes locked onto the young girl's, a 12-year-old with a sketchbook clutched tight, her pencil hovering over a crude drawing of a water filter. Clara knelt beside her at the community center's worn table, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her limbs. A lingering ghost of Daniel's drug. The Portland classroom buzzed with kids' chatter, their energy a pulse that fueled her, but her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as she recalled Daniel's grip on her arm an hour ago. His hissed words, "You're confused, Clara," still burning in her ears. She wasn't confused. She was awake, her scientist's mind sharpening, the tarnished key in her pocket a weight anchoring her to the truth. Clara's hand brushed the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a reminder of the sketch she'd drawn in her lab notebook. The jagged lock, a rebellion against Daniel's control. She'd slipped it from his pocket last night, a small act of defiance after hearing his chilling phone call. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer, forging her resolve. She wasn't the fragile wife he'd painted her to be. She was Clara Bennett, the environmental scientist who'd spent years perfecting a water purification patent to save communities from corporate poison. Here in this classroom, surrounded by kids like Maya, she felt her old self stirring, the woman who'd once believed her work could shift the world. She straightened, her fingers guiding Maya's pencil to refine the filter's design, her voice calm but fierce. See this valve? It's your key to clean water. Never let anyone tell you it's impossible. Maya's eyes widened, her nod eager, and Clara's chest tightened, a mix of pride and pain. She saw herself in Maya, young, hungry to create, before Daniel's subtle cuts had dulled her edges. His interruption earlier, dragging her from this very room, had been a power play, his charm a mask for control. But his eyes had flickered when she'd met his gaze, a crack in his armor, and she'd played along, letting her shoulders slump, her voice waver, to keep him off guard. Her teeth ground harder, the ache grounding her as she pushed back the memory of his cold touch. Clara's gaze flicked to her journal, tucked in her bag, its pages filled with notes on her patent. And now, her suspicions. She'd written about the tea, the chemical tang, Daniel's too-perfect smile, and the key. Each word was a step toward clarity, a map to unravel his betrayal. She'd overheard his plan to erase her, to steal her work, and the key was her first clue, a piece of his puzzle she'd wield against him. She moved to another student, her hands steady as she adjusted a model pump, her voice a beacon of encouragement. Keep testing, Jamal. Failure's just data. The kids grinned, their trust in her a lifeline, pulling her from the cage Daniel had built. But her pulse spiked as she caught Evelyn's shadow outside the classroom window, her neighbor's eyes sharp, watching. Evelyn's fake concern last night, her nod to Daniel's lies, confirmed she was no bystander. Clara's fingers curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She wouldn't let them see her falter. She turned back to Maya, forcing a smile, her voice steady. Your filter's going to save lives one day, she said, her words a vow to herself as much as to the girl. She wasn't done fighting. Not for these kids, not for her patient, not for the truth. The journal in her bag felt heavier, its pages a weapon, and the key in her pocket a promise. She'd play Daniel's game, let him think he'd won, but her mind was racing, piecing together his lies. As the kids packed up, Clara's gaze lingered on the window. Evelyn gone, but her presence a lingering threat. A whisper of the bigger fight waiting just beyond the classroom's walls. You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this, Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket. A secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. She's out. The plan's working. Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist's mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life? Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. You're not well, he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara. His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. I'm sorry, she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. I didn't mean to worry you. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading, while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this," Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket, a secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist's mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. "Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life?" Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. "You're not well," he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. "You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara." His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. "I didn't mean to worry you." Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness, while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're a ghost, Clara, fading fast," Evelyn sneered, her voice a venomous slash as she cornered Clara in the community center's empty hallway, her eyes glinting like sharpened steel. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain shot through her skull, her fingers tightening around the tarnished key in her pocket. The same key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the envelope she'd swiped from his briefcase. Her heart pounded, a war drum echoing his chilling words overheard that night. "She's out. The plan's working." Evelyn's presence, once cloaked in neighborly warmth, now loomed as a threat, her smile a mask peeled back to reveal a predator. Clara's pulse spiked, her nails digging into her palms as she realized Evelyn wasn't just Daniel's spy. She was a cog in a larger machine, one tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara stood her ground, her hazel eyes blazing, refusing to flinch as Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her words cutting. "You're not fit to lead that patent project," Evelyn hissed, her voice low, slicing through the air. "You're weak, Clara. Daniel's right to take over." Clara opened her mouth to retort, but Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't bother. Everyone sees you crumbling." The accusation landed like a fist, but Clara's chest burned with defiance, fueled by the memory of teaching Maya at the center, her resolve to protect her water purification patent for communities choked by pollution. She wasn't crumbling. She was waking up, her scientist mind piecing together the puzzle of Daniel's betrayal, now with Evelyn as his enforcer. Her fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges grounding her as Evelyn's gaze raked over her, searching for weakness. Clara's mind flashed to the envelope, its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, a clue to Daniel's plan to sell her patent to Klein's corporation. "I'm not weak," Clara snapped, her voice a blade, cutting Evelyn's smirk in half. "You don't know me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her lips curling, but Clara saw a flicker of doubt, a crack in her confidence. Evelyn leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Keep pushing, Clara, and you'll lose everything." The threat was a spark, igniting Clara's fury. She wouldn't lose. Not her work, not her voice, not to Daniel or his lackey. Clara's teeth ground harder, the ache anchoring her as she remembered Daniel's fake apology last night, his attempt to cage her with concern. Evelyn's role was clearer now, not just a nosy neighbor, but a spy feeding Daniel details, watching Clara's every move. Her visits, her muffins, her probing questions about Clara's health. They were all part of the plot to paint her as unstable, to steal her patent. Clara's pulse raced, her mind mapping the connections. The key, the envelope, Daniel's phone call, and now Evelyn's unveiled hostility. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, to confirm her suspicions. But Evelyn's presence was a warning. Time was running out. Evelyn turned to leave, her heels clicking like a countdown, but Clara's voice stopped her cold. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her words sharp, a challenge. Evelyn paused, her back stiff, then glanced over her shoulder, her smile venomous. "You're not worth saving, Clara. Stay out of our way." The words cut deep, but Clara's resolve hardened, her fingers curling around the key, its weight a promise. She wouldn't stay out of their way, she'd tear their plan apart. As Evelyn disappeared down the hall, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist mind locking onto the next step. Contacting Elena, decoding the envelope, finding the truth. The community center's walls seemed to pulse, the lock symbol in her mind, a beacon, urging her toward the bigger fight lurking in the shadows. "You're digging your own grave, Clara." Evelyn's voice echoed in Clara's mind, a venomous barb that fueled her as she slipped into a secluded corner of a Portland public library, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed, the tarnished key in her pocket a burning reminder of Daniel's betrayal. She'd overheard his chilling plan. She's out. The plan's working. The sealed envelope, snatched from his briefcase with its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, was now tucked in her bag, a ticking bomb of truth. Evelyn's unveiled hostility at the community center had confirmed her role as Daniel's spy, a cog in a larger scheme tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara's pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms as she dialed Elena Torres, her old lab partner on a burner phone, her scientist mind razor-sharp, ready to unravel the web of lies. Elena's voice crackled through the line, steady but urgent. "Clara, you're not crazy. We'll get answers." Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope, its lock symbol a mirror of the key's promise. "Evelyn's with him," she whispered, her voice a blade, cutting through her fear. "She threatened me. They're after my patent." Elena didn't hesitate. "Meet Tom Reed, my investigator contact. He's already digging into Klein's company." Clara nodded, though Elena couldn't see, her resolve hardening like steel. She wasn't the fragile wife Daniel wanted. Her work, her water purification patent, was her fight for communities drowning in corporate greed, and she'd be damned if she let him steal it. At a dimly lit cafe across town, Clara met Tom, a wiry man with eyes like a hawk, his questions sharp as knives. "Daniel's routine. What's changed?" he asked, cutting off her attempt to explain the key. "Focus, Clara. Details." Her jaw tightened, the ache grounding her as she recounted Daniel's late-night calls, Evelyn's probing visits, the chemical tang of the tea. Tom's pen flew across his notebook, his nod curt. "Klein's corporation has a history of burying green tech. We need hard evidence." Clara slid the envelope across the table, her fingers steady despite her racing pulse. Tom's eyes narrowed, tracing the lock symbol. "This is big," he said, his voice low, a spark igniting in Clara's chest. She was on the right path. But Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, a warning of the danger closing in. Tom instructed Clara to collect a hair sample to test for poisoning. His words were a lifeline. Back home, with Daniel at work, Clara slipped into their bathroom, her hands shaking as she plucked strands from her brush, tucking them into a Ziploc bag. Every creak of the house sent her heart hammering, Evelyn's eyes flashing in her mind, watching from the shadows. She hid the bag in her journal, its pages now a war map, notes on the tea, the key, the envelope, and now the hair sample. Her teeth ground, the pain sharpening her focus as she recalled Daniel's fake apology, his attempt to cage her with concern. She wouldn't drink his tea again, wouldn't trust his smiles. Her scientist's mind was awake, piecing together the puzzle. The key, the lock symbol, Evelyn's role, Daniel's plan. Tom's next move was a recorder, a sleek device Clara planted in Daniel's office under the guise of bringing him coffee. Her hands trembled as she set the mug down, the recorder tucked in her sleeve. "You're up early," Daniel said, his voice a smooth blade, his eyes narrowing as she fumbled the spoon, bending to retrieve it. She slid the recorder under a stack of papers, her pulse a thunderclap, the lock symbol on the envelope flashing in her mind. "Just helping," she mumbled, her voice soft, playing the fragile wife. Daniel's smirk returned, but his gaze lingered, suspicious. She fled, her heart racing, the recorder a ticking bomb in his lair. Days later, Tom played the recording over a secure call. Clara and Elena huddled over the burner phone in a motel room, away from Evelyn's prying eyes. Daniel's voice filled the air, cold and precise, talking to Evelyn. "Klein's ready to pay. Once Clara's declared incompetent, the patent's ours." Evelyn's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "She's fading fast," Evelyn said, her words a mockery of Clara's strength. Clara's nails dug deeper, blood prickling her palms as fury surged. The recording confirmed her suspicions. Daniel and Evelyn were working with Margaret Klein to steal her patent, to bury her technology for profit. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a vow. She'd unlock their lies. Tom's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "We need more. The envelope's a start, but we need Klein's contract." Clara nodded, her mind racing, mapping the next step. She'd mail the hair sample to Tom's lab, confirming the poison, and dig deeper into the envelope's contents. Her thoughts flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a reminder of why she fought. She wasn't just saving herself, she was saving her work, her legacy for communities like Maya's. Evelyn's threat echoed, but Clara's resolve was iron. She'd play Daniel's game, feign weakness, but her strength was sharpening, ready to cut through their web. As she hung up, her fingers brushed the key, the lock symbol in her journal a beacon, pulling her toward the truth waiting to explode. "You're nothing without me, Clara," Daniel's voice sneered in her memory, a vicious echo as Clara hunched over the burner phone in the motel room. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, its rusted edges a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the sealed envelope she'd stolen from his briefcase. A symbol matching the sketch in her journal, a rebellion against his betrayal. The recording she'd planted in his office, its chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Confirmed Daniel's plan with Evelyn and Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart pounded, a war drum fueling her fury as she and Elena pored over the envelope's contents, Tom Reed's voice crackling through the secure call. "Open it, Clara! Now!" he urged, his tone a blade cutting through her hesitation. Her nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her as she ripped the seal, her scientist's mind razor-sharp, ready to expose the truth. The envelope spilled its secrets, a contract, its pages crisp, damning, signed by Daniel and Margaret Klein, CEO of Klein Innovations. Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she scanned the words. Terms to declare her mentally incompetent, transferring her patent rights to Klein's corporation for millions, ensuring her technology would be buried to protect their polluting empire. "They're killing communities," she whispered, her voice a snarl, her eyes blazing with rage. Elena's hand gripped hers, steady but fierce. "This is bigger than you, Clara. They've done this before." Tom's voice cut in, sharp as a whip. "Klein's buried green tech for years. Your patent threatens their profits." Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding harder, the ache a tether to her resolve. The key in her pocket, the lock symbol, the recording, they weren't just clues to Daniel's betrayal. They were threads in a corporate conspiracy poisoning the world she'd fought to save. Her mind flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her sketchbook filled with dreams of clean water. Clara's patent was for kids like her, for towns choked by corporate greed, and Daniel was selling it out. Her chest burned, fury surging as she read deeper into the contract. It outlined a plan to discredit her. Fake medical reports, Evelyn's testimony about her fragility, Daniel's manipulation of her exhaustion. "They planned this," she growled, her voice low, cutting through the motel's silence. Elena's eyes narrowed, her nod curt. "We've got them, Clara, but we need to move fast." Tom's voice crackled again, urgent. "Klein's got lawyers. They'll bury this unless we go public." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its weight a vow. She'd expose them no matter the cost. The contract revealed more. Klein's corporation had suppressed other technologies, buying patents to lock them away, leaving communities like Maya's to suffer. Clara's stomach twisted, the truth a physical blow. Daniel wasn't just betraying her. He was betraying the world, trading lives for profit. Her thoughts raced to the hair sample she'd sent Tom, the test confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning, proof Daniel had drugged her to make her seem unstable. The recording, the envelope, the key, they were her arsenal, but the truth was her weapon. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's gaze locked onto hers, fierce. "You're not broken. You're their nightmare." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl, as she nodded, her resolve iron. Tom's plan was clear. Use the contract and recording at the upcoming Seattle Environmental Conference, where Klein would be speaking. Clara's heart thundered, the stakes higher than ever. Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, her spying eyes a constant danger. Clara's fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges a promise to unlock the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence might hide. She'd play the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her mind was a furnace, forging a plan to shatter their lies. Her journal tucked in her bag held every detail. The T, the key, the lock symbol, the recording, and now this contract was the final piece. She thought of Maya's eager eyes, her own dreams buried under Daniel's control, and vowed to fight for them both. As Elena and Tom mapped the next steps, Clara stood, her hands steady, her scientist's mind plotting each move. The contract was a bombshell, but the conference would be her battlefield. Evelyn's role, Daniel's poison, Klein's greed. They'd underestimated her, and she'd make them pay. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she slipped the contract back into her bag, the lock symbol a beacon in her mind. The motel room's shadows pulsed, the key in her pocket a ticking clock, whispering of the reckoning waiting to erupt. "You're a liability, Clara," Evelyn spat, her voice a venomous slash as she blocked Clara's path in the deserted Portland warehouse, her eyes glinting like a predator's in the dim light. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain seared her skull, her fingers clutching the tarnished key in her pocket. The key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the contract that exposed his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. The recording she'd planted, Daniel's chilling words, "She's fading fast, the patent's ours," and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning burned in her mind, fueling her fury. Evelyn's threat at the community center, "Stay out of our way," had lured Clara here under the pretense of answers. But now two hired thugs flanked Evelyn, their fists curled, their presence a physical threat. Clara's pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind raced, calculating her escape. Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown, her smirk a blade. "You should have stayed down, Clara." Weak, like Daniel said. Clara's chest burned, her breath sharp as she snapped, "I'm not weak." Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't talk. You're done." The thugs advanced, one grabbing Clara's arm, his grip iron, twisting until her shoulder screamed. She yanked free, her heart hammering, her eyes darting for an exit. The warehouse's shadows loomed, but Clara's mind was a furnace, flashing to Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water tied to Clara's patent. She wouldn't let Evelyn, Daniel, or Klein's goons bury her work, or her. "You're in too deep," Evelyn hissed, her voice a knife, cutting off Clara's attempt to speak. "Klein's paying big to keep your tech locked away. You're just collateral." Clara's fury surged, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against the fear. The contract she'd found, the lock symbol matching her journal's sketch, revealed Klein's history of suppressing green tech. And Evelyn was their enforcer, not just a spy. Clara's fingers tightened on the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a vow to fight for the communities her patent could save. She lunged toward a stack of crates, dodging a thug's grab, her body moving on instinct. "You can't stop me," she snarled, her voice a blade slicing through Evelyn's smirk. The second thug charged, his fist swinging, but Clara ducked, her scientist's precision guiding her. She grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, her hands steady despite the pain shooting through her arm. "Back off!" she shouted, swinging the pipe, her eyes blazing. Evelyn laughed, a cold mocking sound, but her gaze flickered with doubt as Clara stood her ground. The thugs hesitated, their fists still raised, and Clara's mind raced, mapping the warehouse's layout, searching for a way out. The key in her pocket was her anchor, tied to the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence waited. She needed to survive this, to reach Elena and Tom, to expose Klein's conspiracy at the Seattle conference. Evelyn's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Finish her!" she barked, her composure cracking. The thugs lunged, but Clara swung the pipe again, connecting with one's knee, his grunt echoing as he stumbled. She bolted toward a side door, her heart a war drum, her legs burning as she dodged crates. Evelyn's scream followed, "You'll regret this!" But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on the contract, the recording, the hair sample. She'd played Daniel's fragile wife, but here, in this trap, she was a fighter. The door was steps away, but a thug's hand grazed her shoulder, yanking her back. Clara twisted, her elbow slamming into his jaw, her fury a wildfire. She burst through the door, her breath ragged, the key in her pocket a ticking bomb, promising a reckoning as she ran into the night. Evelyn's threats echoing behind her. "You'll never outrun us, Clara." Evelyn's scream echoed in Clara's ears as she stumbled through Portland's back alleys, her lungs burning, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket bit into her thigh, a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the contract she'd stolen from Daniel's briefcase, proof of his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart thundered, each beat a war drum as she replayed the warehouse ambush. Evelyn's thugs nearly crushing her, her desperate escape fueled by the recording's chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." The hair sample confirming tetrotoxin poisoning and the contract exposing Klein's corporate greed were her weapons. But she needed more. Irrefutable evidence to bury them at the Seattle conference. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist's mind raced, plotting her next move. Clara ducked into a shadowed doorway, her breath ragged, her eyes scanning for Elena's car. Her old lab partner's voice had been a lifeline on the burner phone minutes ago. "Get to Daniel's office. The key's your shot." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its rusted edges grounding her against the fear. The warehouse fight had left her bruised, her shoulders screaming from the thug's grip. But her resolve was iron. She'd fought for Maya, the girl at the community center, for communities choking on corporate pollution. Her patent was their salvation, and she wouldn't let Daniel or Evelyn steal it. A car screeched to a stop, Elena's face sharp behind the wheel, Tom Reed in the passenger seat, his hawk-like eyes locked on her. "Move!" Elena snapped, her voice a blade, cutting through Clara's hesitation. Clara dove into the back seat, her pulse hammering as Elena floored the gas, tires squealing. "They're tailing us," Tom barked, his head craning to check the rear view. Clara's stomach twisted. Evelyn's threat. "You'll regret this," ringing in her skull. She clutched the key, her mind flashing to the lock symbol, the contract's damning words. Daniel and Klein's plan to declare her incompetent, to bury her tech for profit. "The safe in his office," Clara said, her voice a snarl, cutting through the car's tension. "The key fits it. There's more evidence." Tom nodded, his pen flying across a notebook, his words sharp. "We get the safe's contents. We've got them cold." Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she pictured Daniel's smug face, his fake concern caging her for years. They reached Daniel's law firm, its glass facade looming, but the late hour left it empty. Clara led the way, her hands trembling but steady, the key her guide. The office was dark, Daniel's desk a fortress of secrets. She knelt, her fingers probing for the safe, her pulse a thunderclap as she found it hidden beneath a panel. The key slid in, the lock clicking open with a sound like a gunshot. Her breath hitched, her scientist's precision guiding her as she pulled out a flash drive and a stack of documents. Tom's eyes narrowed, scanning the pages, his voice low. Emails between Daniel and Klein, dates, payments, a video file. Clara's heart surged, her fury a wildfire as she plugged the drive into Tom's laptop, her hands steady despite the bruises on her knuckles. The video loaded, Daniel's face filling the screen, his voice cold, precise, speaking to Klein. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Klein's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "Good. No one'll miss her tech. Or her," she said, her words a mockery of Clara's fight. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on a hidden camera Clara hadn't known existed. Her nails dug deeper, blood welling as rage surged. "They taped it," she growled, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's hand gripped her shoulder, fierce. "This is your silver bullet, Clara." Tom nodded, his eyes blazing. "We take this to the conference. They're done." Clara's mind raced, mapping the plan. The Seattle conference was tomorrow. Klein's keynote on their stage. The video, the contract, the hair sample, they were her arsenal, but Evelyn's thugs were still out there. And Daniel's suspicion was growing. She thought of Maya's sketchbook, her dreams of clean water, and her resolve hardened. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice low, cutting through the office's silence. Tom's gaze met hers sharp. "They underestimated you. Let's move." Clara tucked the flash drive into her pocket, the key beside it, its weight a vow. She'd played the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her strength was a coiled spring, ready to snap. As they slipped out, headlights flashed outside, Evelyn's car idling in the lot. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she ducked behind a desk, Elena and Tom crouching beside her. "She's tracking us," Elena whispered, her voice a hiss. Clara's fingers curled around the flash drive, the lock symbol in her journal flashing in her mind. A beacon of truth. They needed to reach the conference, to expose Daniel and Klein before Evelyn's goons closed in. Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind plotting each step, her fury a furnace. The video was her weapon, but the stakes were higher now. Evelyn's pursuit, Daniel's lies, Klein's greed. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for herself. The office's shadows pulsed, the flash drive in her pocket a ticking bomb, whispering of the showdown waiting to erupt. "You're finished, Clara," Daniel hissed, his voice a venomous blade as he seized the microphone at the Seattle Environmental Conference. His tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw menace in his eyes. Clara stood at his side, her hand trembling in his grip, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, playing the frail wife he expected. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, tying her to the lock symbol on the stolen contract, the flash drive with the damning video, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning, her arsenal against his betrayal, overheard that night. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Evelyn's thugs had nearly crushed her in the warehouse, but the video from Daniel's safe, showing him drugging her tea, was her silver bullet, ready to fire. Her pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind sharpened, poised for the kill. Daniel's voice boomed, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "My wife's struggling," he said, his tone heavy with false concern, his eyes glinting with triumph. "She needs care, a hospital stay." The audience of scientists and activists gasped, their pity a wave crashing over Clara, but her chest burned with fury, fueled by Maya's dreams of clean water, her patent's promise to save communities. "Don't speak for me," she snapped, her voice a whip, slicing his words in half. Daniel's grip tightened, his smile faltering, but he cut her off, his voice sharp. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." The crowd leaned in, their eyes on her, but Clara's gaze flicked to Elena, near a marble pillar, her nod a lifeline, signaling the plan was live. Clara yanked her hand free, her heart hammering, and strode to the stage, each step shedding her fragility. "Enough lies," she growled, snatching the microphone from Daniel's hand, her eyes blazing, his face drained of color, his mouth opening. But she cut him off, her voice a blade. "You architected betrayal, Daniel, not love." The crowd stilled, their breath held as Clara signaled Elena. The massive screen behind her flickered, Tom Reed's tech overriding the feed. Daniel's voice filled the room, cold and precise from the video. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Margaret Klein's laugh followed, a knife in Clara's chest. "No one'll miss her tech. Or her." Gaffes erupted, the audience's eyes darting to Daniel and Klein. Seated in the front row, her face paling. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on the hidden camera from his safe. Evelyn, in the crowd, froze, her smug smile collapsing as her spying role flashed on screen. Emails exposing her as Klein's informant. Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she faced the crowd, her voice clear, cutting. "They poisoned me to steal my patent, to bury clean water for profit." Daniel lunged, his voice a snarl. "That's fake." But Elena stepped forward, blocking his path, her eyes fierce. "It's real," Clara said, her words a hammer, smashing his facade. Klein stood, her composure crumbling, but Clara's gaze pinned her, unwavering. "You thought I was a ghost," she said, her voice iron. "But I'm here, and I remember." The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts, their shock a validation of Clara's truth. Daniel's eyes blazed, his voice a desperate hiss. "You'll pay for this." But Clara stood tall, her scientist mind a fortress, her fury a wildfire. The hair sample, the contract, the video, they were her proof, and the crowd was her jury. Elena's hand grazed her shoulder, a quiet strength, as Tom's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece. "Cops are here!" Police surged through the doors, their steps steady, cuffs gleaming. "Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein," an officer barked. "You're under arrest." Daniel's face twisted, his snarl a final claw at Clara's resolve. But she held his gaze, her heart steady, the key in her pocket, a vow fulfilled. Klein's head bowed, her empire crumbling, as Evelyn slipped toward the exit, her betrayal laid bare. Clara's voice rose, addressing the crowd. "This patent is for you, for communities fighting for clean water." The audience roared, their awe replacing pity, her strength a beacon. Daniel's threat echoed, "You'll pay." But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on Maya, on the communities her work would save. The screen looped the video, a relentless truth, as Clara stepped back, her breath steady, her scientist's mind plotting the next fight. The conference hall pulsed, the tarnished key in her pocket a silent promise, whispering of the justice still to come. "You'll pay, Clara," Daniel's snarl echoed in her mind, a venomous claw as Clara stood in the Portland courtroom, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. The tarnished key now on a chain around her neck, pressed against her skin, a reminder of the lock symbol on the contract, the video exposing Daniel's poisoning, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin. Her arsenal that shattered his plan at the Seattle conference. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced the judge, her scientist mind sharp, her resolve iron. Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn sat in the dock, their faces pale, their empires crumbling under the weight of her truth. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she recalled Daniel's chilling words overheard that night. She's fading fast. The patent's ours. She hadn't faded. She'd ignited. The judge's gavel cracked, a sound like a gunshot as he read the verdict. Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein, guilty of conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, but Clara stood tall, her hazel eyes blazing, her voice silent, but her presence a blade. Daniel's gaze met hers, his eyes burning with defiance, but she didn't flinch. "You thought you'd erase me," she whispered under her breath, her words a vow cutting through the air. Klein's head bowed, her corporate mask shattered, while Evelyn's smug smirk was gone, her role as spy laid bare by the video and emails shown at the conference. The judge continued, his voice stern. "The patent is restored to Clara Bennett. Klein Innovations is under investigation." Clara's chest surged, her fury cooling into triumph. Her work, her water purification patent, returned to her hands. Daniel lunged forward, his voice a desperate hiss. "This isn't over!" The bailiff grabbed him, cuffs gleaming, but Clara's gaze held steady, her teeth grinding, the ache anchoring her. "It is for you," she said, her voice low, a final slash. The contract, the video, the hair sample, they'd been her weapons, and the courtroom was her battlefield. Every loose end tied, Evelyn's financial motives exposed, Klein's greed dismantled, Daniel's betrayal punished. The crowd murmured, their awe replacing the pity she'd endured at the conference. Clara's fingers brushed the key on her chain, its rusted edges a symbol of her unlocked strength. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water now within reach because of Clara's fight. As Daniel was led away, his snarl fading, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind already turning to the future. The patent was hers, but the fight wasn't just for her. It was for communities choking on corporate pollution. Elena, standing beside her, squeezed her hand, her eyes fierce. "You did it," she said, her voice a spark. Tom Reed nodded from the back, his hawk-like gaze softening with respect. Clara's resolve hardened, her heart a furnace, as she vowed to use her victory to build something greater. The courtroom doors swung open, the crowd parting, their whispers now of admiration, not doubt. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet promise of the legacy she'd forge, a beacon whispering of the hope waiting to rise. "You broke her, Daniel, but she rebuilt the world." Elena's voice sliced through the courtroom's tension, her words a fierce jab as Clara stood beside her, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain seared her skull. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrodotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent. But his final snarl, "This isn't over," lingered like a shadow. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced Daniel one last time, his cuffs gleaming, his eyes burning with defiance. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist's mind churned, not with fear but with purpose. She'd turn her pain into hope. Daniel's voice cracked, his polished mask shattered as he spoke from the dock. "I was wrong, Clara," he said, his tone low, raw, a confession forced by her courtroom triumph. I'll make it right." Her eyes narrowed, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against his words. She didn't trust him, not after his lies. His pill slipped into her tea, his plan to steal her patent for Klein's empire. But his next move stunned her. He leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "My firm's profits, they're yours. For clean water." The crowd gasped, the judge's gavel hovering, as Daniel's lawyer confirmed. Millions redirected to fund water initiatives. Clara's chest surged, Not with forgiveness, but with possibility, her fury cooling into resolve. She wouldn't take his money. She'd use it to save lives. Clara strode from the courtroom, Elena at her side, her steps deliberate, her scientist mind already mapping her next move. She'd launched the Bennett Clean Water Initiative, distributing her patents technology to communities choked by corporate pollution. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight a vow. She'd build something Daniel couldn't touch. At a Portland community center, she announced the initiative, her voice clear, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "This is for you," she said, her eyes locking onto Maya, the girl whose sketchbook held dreams of clean water. "For every town fighting for a future." The crowd roared, their hands clapping, their faces alight. But Clara's pulse spiked, Evelyn's spying eyes flashing in her memory, a reminder of the fight she'd endured. She moved to her new lab, a sunlit space she'd leased far from Daniel's sterile cage. Her hands steadied, signing contracts to send purification systems to rural towns, her scientist's precision guiding each step. Maya's mother, a single parent from a polluted district, approached, her voice trembling. "You saved us," she said, handing Clara a letter from her town, their water now clean. Clara's throat tightened, her fingers curling around the key, its rusted edges a reminder of her journey, from the T, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of impact. "It's just the start," Clara said, her voice a blade, slicing through doubt. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for the millions her patent could reach. Elena joined her, her eyes fierce. "You're changing the game," she said, her hand gripping Clara's shoulder, a spark of their old lab days. Tom Reed's text pinged, news of Klein's company collapsing under scrutiny, a ripple from Clara's victory. Her heart surged, her resolve iron as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the lives it would save. At the lab, she pinned the letter from Maya's town to a board, next to her journal, its pages once filled with suspicions, now a record of triumph. "This is hope," she said, her voice low, addressing the team assembling her systems. "We build it together." Their nods were fuel, their hands moving with purpose, her patent no longer a target but a beacon. Clara's teeth ground, the ache a reminder of her fight as she signed another contract, her hands steady. Daniel's money would fund systems for a dozen towns, but her initiative was hers, born from her pain, her defiance. She thought of the community center, Maya's eager eyes, and vowed to mentor others, to give them the voice Daniel tried to silence. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a symbol of her unlocked strength. The lab buzzed, her team's energy a pulse, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her scientist's mind plotting ahead. She'd protect her legacy, her purpose. The letter on the board fluttered, a quiet promise, whispering of the lives she'd touch, the hope she'd forge from the ashes of betrayal. "You can't erase me, Daniel," Clara whispered, her voice a fierce blade as she stood in her sunlit Portland lab, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain anchored her resolve. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed him, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent, while Daniel's donation of his firm's profits fueled her Bennett Clean Water Initiative. His final snarl, "This isn't over," echoed faintly, but Clara's heart pounded, a war drum, as she leaned over her drafting table, her scientist's mind blazing with purpose. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she sketched a new purification system, her legacy for communities like Maya's, the girl whose dreams fueled her fight. Clara's pencil moved with precision, each line a vow to rebuild what Daniel tried to destroy. The lab buzzed, her team assembling systems for towns choking on corporate pollution, their hands moving with the same fire she felt. Maya, the 12-year-old from the community center, stood beside her, her sketchbook open, her pencil tracing a filtered design Clara had refined. "It'll work now," Maya said, her eyes bright, her voice a spark. Clara's chest surged, her throat tightening as she nodded. "You made it better," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the lab's hum. Maya's grin was a mirror of Clara's younger self, the scientist who dreamed big before Daniel's lies caged her. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a reminder of her journey, from the poison tea, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of rebirth. Elena burst through the door, her eyes fierce, holding a letter from a rural Oregon town. "They've got clean water, Clara, because of you." She thrust the paper into Clara's hands, her grip a lifeline, their old lab days flashing in her nod. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she read the words. A community of 500, free from polluted wells. Thanking her initiative. Her heart swelled, her fury cooling into purpose as she pinned the letter above her desk, next to her journal. Once a record of Daniel's betrayal, now a testament to her triumph. "This is why we fight," she said, her voice a blade slicing through doubt. The team cheered, their hands clapping, their faces alight, but Clara's mind flashed to Maya's mother, her gratitude in the courtroom, a spark that fueled her mission. Tom Reed's text pinged, his words sharp. "Klein's assets seized. You changed the game." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the towns it would save. Her hands steadied, signing a contract to send systems to 5 more communities, her scientist's precision guiding each stroke. "For them," she said, her voice low, addressing Maya, who clutched her sketchbook, her eyes wide. "Your designs will do this too." Maya's nod was fierce, her pencil moving faster, and Clara's chest tightened, pride surging. She'd been Daniel's ghost, but now she was their beacon, her patent a lifeline for millions. The lab's energy pulsed, her team's hands assembling filters, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her fingers brushing the key as she recalled Evelyn's spying eyes, Klein's greed, the warehouse ambush. She'd survived, but vigilance was her armor. She moved to a board, pinning Maya's sketch next to the letter, her voice clear. "Your voice is your strength," she told Maya, her words a vow, echoing her own fight. "Never let it be silenced." Maya's eyes brimmed, mirroring Clara's journey, and Clara's heart steadied, her resolve iron. She thought of the community center, her journal's suspicions, the key's promise, each a step to this moment, where her pain became purpose. A knock interrupted, and Elena led in a young scientist, Lila, her hands nervous around a prototype. I want to join," Lila said, her voice trembling but fierce. Clara's gaze softened, her scientist's mind seeing her younger self in Lila's fire. "Show me," she said, her voice a spark, guiding Lila to the table. They worked, Clara's hands steady, refining Lila's design, her words sharp. "Your ideas matter. Fight for them." Lila's nod was aflame, and Clara's chest surged, her legacy growing. The letter from the Oregon town pinned above was a testament, but Lila's prototype, Maya's sketch, her team's work, they were her new family, forged in the fire of her fight. Clara stepped back, her pencil hovering, as a bottle of ink tipped, spilling black across her sketch. Her breath hitched, the old panic flaring, Daniel's tea, the poison, the journal's lock symbol. But she stopped, her fingers tracing the spill, dipping her pencil into the mess. She wove the ink into her design, the dark streaks becoming pipes, channels, a symbol of scars transformed. Her teeth ground, the ache a vow as she finished the sketch, a purification system for a town like Maya's. "Pain builds strength," she said, her voice low, addressing her team, their nods fuel. Elena's eyes gleamed, her hand squeezing Clara's shoulder. "Your hope," she said, her words a spark. The lab's hum softened, Clara's gaze lingering on the letter, the key, Maya's sketch. Daniel's threat echoed, but it held no power. She'd burned her journal, its suspicions now ashes, replaced by this lab, this purpose. Lila's prototype hummed, Maya's pencil moved, and Clara's heart steadied, her scientist's mind plotting new systems, new lives. She stepped outside, the Portland skyline glowing, her hands steady as she held her pencil. No longer Daniel's tool, but hers. The moral burned clear. Your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced. It tied her journey, Daniel's betrayal, Elena's loyalty, Maya's dreams, Lila's fire, into a legacy of hope. Clara returned to her desk, her fingers adding one final line to the sketch. A pipe wide and open for communities needing it. The lab's light spilled onto the street, a beacon in the dusk. She closed her sketchbook, her smile quiet but unshakable, her team around her, her new family forging a future. Daniel's voice, Klein's greed, Evelyn's betrayal. They were ghosts fading in her strength. She wasn't the woman who'd collapsed under poison, but Clara, architect of her future, her blueprint reclaimed. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet vow, whispering of the lives she'd build, the hope she'd leave behind. Clara's journey teaches us that your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced, no matter how deep the betrayal. Her fight from a poisoned cup to a reclaimed legacy shows the power of resilience and truth. What did Clara's defiance stir in you? A memory, a feeling, a fire of your own? Share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from, and what moment hit you hardest? Your story matters just like hers. Thank you for joining us through every twist and heartbeat of this tale. Your support lights our path, and we're so grateful. Stay tuned for more stories of courage and truth. We'll see you in the next chapter. Keep building your own blueprint.